Today's training is about emergency behavior intervention. It is EBI, understanding our conflict communication styles, and verbal de-escalation. The reason we do this training is because we are a non-restraint facility and we have a treatment modality of TBRI, both of which emphasize de-escalation techniques that are non-physical. Our conflict communication styles that we're going to be talking about are avoiding, like the turtle, competing, like the shark, collaborating, like the owl, compromising, like the fox, and accommodating, like the teddy bear. And so we'll actually get to do an exercise learning our own personal conflict communication style and how that helps us work with other people around us, not only on our shift, but with the children that we serve. Our course competencies. At the end of this course, our participants, staff, will be able to acknowledge their own conflict management style, recognize the stages of escalation and common triggers with agitation and aggression, and how to intervene without escalating a youth using verbal de-escalation techniques. I really like the picture here. It says if we want kids and teens to make best choices, we have to help them get calm. De-escalation strategies are the tools in the toolbox that helps us get there. I like to think of all the training that staff have participated in. If you can reflect back to when we did orientation, boy, what kind of training we had there, all types of training. And so we put those in our toolbox to use to help us better work and serve the youth that we work with on a daily basis. And so if we take in those tools and do nothing with them, they're useless. And so part of this course with the EBI, understanding your conflict style, recognizing the stages of escalation, triggers of agitation and aggression, and how to use verbal de-escalation techniques, that's just another tool in your toolbox. We are going to talk about TBRI in this workshop because we will always talk about TBRI since it's our treatment modality. And we'll talk about the importance of being a non-restraint facility because we don't want to re-traumatize youth. Again, we're going to put all these items in our toolbox, but it's important that we keep our toolbox with us, we keep it fresh, and we use all the tools that we've learned. And so not only do we need to take this training, but we need to then apply the training to our job to better serve the kids that we work with. So that's the biggest challenge for staff, is not only getting the tools and getting your toolbox ready, but putting it into use and using it every day on shift. Crossing the line into a crisis situation. Wow, look at the little kids arguing over there on the right. And look at that temperature gauge really going up to the top. It's almost like it's going to shoot out the top. It's important to develop strategies for ensuring personal safety in potentially problematic situations. So our big thing here is to be aware of conflict, how that impacts us personally, being mindful of ourselves. Remember, in TBRI, we learned that one of the biggest things that we can do for the kids is to be mindful of where we come from, not only our personal background, but how we handle conflict and aggression. And then being able to what? Remain calm. The biggest thing that we can give kids is our ability to be calm in a frustrating or chaotic situation. So in any conflict, you have a choice. Just like our kids have choices, we have a choice. And our two choices are to escalate the incident further by not using our tools that we've learned, or not following rules that we've been given, not following policy. Or we can de-escalate the situation using our TBRI, using our EBI, using these de-escalation techniques, verbal de-escalation techniques, to help the kids with these situations of aggression. Some of the things that we have to be mindful of is the surroundings that are setting the kid off, that are making the kid frustrated. Are we actively transitioning the kids and letting them know, hey, in 5 minutes we're going to stop doing this activity and do another activity? Are we being encouraging? Are we using praise? Are we using positive reinforcement? Are we trying to give more yeses than no's. And so trying to be encouraging, trying to have them work towards a goal, setting small goals for kiddos. And then acknowledging when they have met those goals is very important so we can reinforce that behavior change with them. So again, crossing the line into a crisis situation, in any conflict, we have two choices: to escalate the incident further or to de-escalate the situation. And so we're going to talk more about that in the next slides. How do you manage conflict? Wow, that's a big decision because, to be honest, it's very, a lot of people say that depends on who I'm in conflict with or what the conflict's about. But a personal strategy for managing conflict in our environment it's learned in childhood. How your parents handled conflict with you and how you learned to handle conflict as a child carries with you into adulthood. And so, unfortunately, some of us had bad conflict management styles. So we have to unlearn those behaviors. And so some of those functions that we react with, that reactive behavior, happens automatically. So we have to consciously be aware of those if they're not effective and they don't meet our guidelines here, so we can undo those behaviors. So it's kind of like a bad habit. So if we do not have good conflict management style and we're more aggressive, more antagonistic, or on the same concept of being, not helpful to children, it's also not helpful if you totally ignore bad behaviors and just let them occur and be kind of a hands-off parent or a hands-off staff member. And by ignoring behaviors and just letting the kids get into arguments and get into conflicts with other people and just trying to let them work themselves out, when our kids don't possess those skills, is also just as destructive as just arguing and getting into power struggles with the kids. So we default to what comes naturally to us. So you've got to know, am I aggressive? Am I avoiding? Am I collaborating? Am I compromising? Am I accommodating? And so we really need to know what our conflict management style is and how that plays into working with the kids that we work with. I know that when we work with oppositionally defiant kids, being a competing or an aggressive shark with those children is not effective because it just makes them more volatile. And also, if you dealt with a child who's more of an avoiding, more of a turtle, or more of accommodating, kind of those sweet kids who always say yes to everything and try to be a people pleaser, that's a teddy bear. If you're too aggressive with them and you have more of a competing conflict management style, you're going to frighten those children and re-traumatize them. So that's not good. So those are just some examples of how this training is going to help us improve our ability to manage conflict by, number one, again, managing ourselves first. So your safety may depend on your own conflict management style. And that really plays a true part in everything we do. How we handle the situation really does radiate down on how the kids will handle that situation. Calm yields calm. Let's understand the conflict communication styles. Let's start with the left here. We see conflict management style with that black frame around it. And so with high assertiveness, assertive behavior is when you're able to get your point across. You're able to say what you need to say, so you're assertive. That is going to definitely be on the side of competing or collaborating, which collaborating has more of a cooperative approach. Competing is more a direct approach. And so sometimes in cases of extreme danger, a direct approach is needed. But oftentimes what we're faced with here is not extreme danger. It is actually just disruptive behavior that needs to be addressed. So that needs to be addressed at a lower tier level, like collaborating or compromising. Now notice compromising is in the middle. Compromising has kind of all the good qualities of the things that we need as far as assertiveness and relationship building. And so really cooperativeness on the bottom there with this style, I like to think of, instead of using that word, to be more on relationship building. The avoiding person, that turtle there, they tend to be very hands-off, and they can be perceived as uninterested, like I'm really not interested in you, I'm not engaged in you. That's when we have like staff members on their phone, or staff members not playing with the children and being active members of their group. They're observing them, but they're not being part of the relationship building of the kiddo. They're not following rules, and they're not following guidelines. And so, I hate to say that, but it's kind of like the people that are here just for a paycheck. And so I know they could make more money somewhere else doing different things. Go into the IT field where you don't have to work with people if you want to be an avoiding person, because then you're by yourself with a computer, and that might be a better job for them. Accommodating is the persons who have kind of like a you win, I lose situation, I being the staff member. The relationship is valued being over being right or wrong, and it can be perceived as a pushover. So those staff members are in the buddy zone. They're worried about what the kids think as far as do you like me? It's not about liking you. It's about being a responsible adult and being respectful of the relationship, and making sure that the child has good guardianship, good leadership, and good supervision. And so it's good to have that nurturing, loving teddy bear staff member here, but they have to be a rule follower. So if I have a staff member who falls in one of these categories alone, it's our goal to get them more to the middle, to that compromising. The compromising is where I win some, you win some. I lose some, you lose some. We all learn that in life that's a process. It's useful when mutual desire to resolve conflict is needed. It can result in poor outcomes if a sacrifice is interest for sake of an agreement. So you want to make sure that you're compromising, and it is a compromise that everybody's willing to accept. Competing, which is that shark, it's very direct. It's an I win, you lose situation. That's usually I'm the adult, I'm in charge, my way or the highway. You get timely results sometimes with that, but not always strong relationships. So relationships not the priority. The kid doesn't respect you. The kid more fears you and fears what's the consequences they're going to face with that. And so it doesn't yield strong change. It yields resentment. So we want to have some directive or assertive characteristics, but of course we don't want to fall in that category either. We don't want to be in that category either, because you don't really maintain good relationships with the children. And part of TBRI that we learn about is healing is in the connection. The biggest part of TBRI is understanding connection, then empowerment, and then correction. And so correction is our smallest component. If you remember that triangle that we had in TBRI, the triangle's base, the biggest part of our training system is connections and building relationships. Of course, that collaborating or cooperative approach is a win-win. We maximize interest for all, and we take time to hear from everybody, and it builds a strong relationship. So I really feel in our environment, it's better to have a collaborating OWL type staff member with the capability of compromising, because sometimes we're going to have to give that child that other choice. Remember how with TBRI we give two choices with a compromise on that second choice, where the child gets to have some input. And so as we go through this training, we're going to learn more which style we are. And so our goal for staff is to notice where they are fitting in on this conflict communication style, and where they need to change and grow so they can develop some of these other skill sets. Now we're going to go and do an activity. So I had left some conflict communication style worksheets in the PD room. It's basically what you see here on the screen. So if you didn't get one, that's okay. You just need to get a piece of paper out and write the letters A through the letter O on a piece of paper. And then how we're going to do this is we are going to read the 15 statements below. Each statement provides a possible strategy for dealing with a conflict. And you're going to give a statement a numerical value. And so here's the numbers that we're going to use, okay? 1 means you always deal with this situation like that. 2 is you very often, but not always, deal with a situation like that. 3 is sometimes, I deal with a situation like that. Or 4, not very often do I deal with a situation like that. Or 5, I do not deal with a situation like that at all, or rarely do I behave like that. Now, I don't want you to answer how you think you should behave. I want you to think about how you actually behave. And so, if you were to, let's start with number 1 there. I argue my case with my peers or colleagues and coworkers to demonstrate the merits of the position I take. And so if you do not allow other people to express their opinion, then you might say number 1, like I always argue my case with my peers, like I'm not very willing to listen to them. That would be number 1 as always. Or if you often listen to your peers and you allow people to communicate their beliefs and their opinions, then you might want to put number 5 there, like you rarely do that. So again, 5 is a rarely or the least amount, and 1 is always or the most amount of how you might behave. So then we're going to go through the following questions. And so rather than me answering the questions for you, we're just going to start at the top and I'm going to read through the questions so you can write your answers down. And then we're going to score them on the next slide. So it's going to be important for you to make sure that your value system, that 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5, are directly sitting next to your statement label, which is like A, B, C, D, E. Okay? So let's start with number A again. Okay, our statements are: statement number A, I argue my case with my peers, colleagues, and coworkers to demonstrate their merits of the position I take. Okay, now let's move on. I'm going to allow a little bit of time after each sentence so you can write your answer down. B, I try to reach compromise through negotiation. C, I attempt to meet the expectations of others. D, I seek to investigate issues with others in order to find solutions that are mutually acceptable. And mutually acceptable means that everyone is in agreement on that. E, I'm firm in resolve when it comes to defending my side of the issue. F, I try to avoid being singled out, keeping conflict with myself. Oh, sorry, let's try that again. F, I try to avoid being singled out, keeping conflict with others to myself. So you don't really share your conflict with others, is what that's trying to say. G, I uphold my solutions to problems. And that means you stand firm on your answer. H, I compromise in order to reach solutions. I trade important information with others so that problems can be solved together. J, I avoid discussing my differences with others. K, I try to accommodate the wishes of my peers and colleagues. L, I seek to bring everyone's concerns into the open in order to resolve disputes in the best way possible. M, I put forward middle positions in effort to break deadlocks. N, I accept recommendations from colleagues, peers, and coworkers. And O, I avoid hard feelings by keeping my disagreements with others to myself. Now look back at your sheet. Make sure that you have A through O and that you've answered each question or each statement with a value system. Again, the value systems were always, very often, sometimes, not very often, and rarely, with number 1 being always, 2 being very often, 3 sometimes, 4 not very often, and 5 rarely. Now, let's score our questionnaire. The 15 statements you just read are listed below in 5 categories. Okay? Each category contains the letters of the 3 statements. Record the number you placed next to each statement. Calculate the total under each category. And your results would show my dominant style is your lowest score. My backup style is your second lowest score on how you behave, okay? So on shark or competing, we're looking at questions A, E, and G only. Once you get the number values for A, E, and G, add them up there on the right. Collaborating, or the owl. For the owl on collaborating, we're looking at D, I, and L. D, I, and L. Again, add those up and calculate them on the right. For the turtle or avoiding, we are looking at questions F, J, and O. Again, that is questions F, J, and O. Add those up and calculate them on the right. For accommodating, or the teddy bear, we're looking at C, K, and N. Again, we're looking at C, K, and N for accommodating on the teddy bear. And then on the fox or compromising, we're looking at B, H, and M. B, H, and M. Calculate those and add them onto the right. What I like people to do is write your lowest score, so the score that has the least amount of points. So like if you have a 1 or a 5 or something like that, then add that up and circle it. So whatever point value system you would have, you would circle the lowest one. And then I want you to, in the totals. And so then I want you to circle your second lowest score in the totals. Those two are your dominant and your backup style for how to handle your communication style in a conflict. So in some cases, people are, like I said, are going to be a shark. And then their next backup style could be any one of the following 4: an owl, a turtle, a teddy bear, or a fox. And it is dependent on sometimes the situation around the conflict or also who you're in conflict with. There's a lot of variables. Now we're going to learn more about these styles. Again, like I said, none of these styles are absolutely awful. So if you scored one that you think that is upsetting to you, like a turtle or a shark or something like that, don't feel bad about that. That's just how you personally handle conflict. It's your background. It's being mindful of who you are. Understand that you can also be more than one style, and you can grow in your skill level. Let's look at the next page. Now, let's learn about the conflict management styles, that assessment. So what does it really mean? So we're going to start out with the shark. The shark is a competing style. Sharks use a forcing or competing conflict management style, so it's more of a win-lose situation, my way or the highway. Sharks are very high goal-oriented. Their relationships take lower priority. So if they've got like a mission to accomplish, they're going to accomplish that mission. Sharks do not hesitate to use aggressive behavior to resolve conflicts. In our situation, staff can get loud, staff can be fussy, staff could be demanding, that kind of thing like that. Sharks can be autocratic or authoritative and uncooperative, threatening and intimidating others. And so sharks have a need to win, therefore others must lose, creating a win-lose situation. The one thing I've learned over time from doing this workshop is that people who are in leadership roles have to have a little bit of shark in them. So sometimes people will say, well, gosh, my admin team sometimes act like sharks. Well, yeah, they're in a leadership role. Leaders have to have some shark-like features, but they also have compromising and collaborating features. Very seldom should a leader have a turtle feature or a teddy bear feature. Those two features are not meant for a leadership role. But you don't want to stay in that shark-like stance. So what is the advantage of being a shark? See that in kind of that teal color? The advantage is if the shark's decision is correct, their focus and determination drives success of the endeavor. So they're not going to give up till that goal's being met. And so that is an awesome aspect of the shark, is they're determined to reach that goal, especially if it's a positive goal for everyone. A disadvantage is that it may breed hostility and resentment toward the person using this style. So there are appropriate times when to use the shark style. Let's talk about that. When a conflict involves personal differences that are difficult to change, like there is an impasse, we can't get to an impasse. Sometimes we have to push forward and make a decision. When fostering intimate or supportive relationships is not critical. So if we're just working through a team project, but it's not really based on relationship or getting along, and we just have to get a project done, then that can be okay. When others are likely to take advantage of a non-competitive behavior. And so if you've got some other people in the mix who are making the process ineffective. And so this is where I like to explain the circumstances. If we have staff on a shift, and that's the best way to look at it because you're a team. If you have staff on a shift and let's say one of the staff members is not monitoring their group and they're on their phone a lot and they've disappeared a lot while on shift, a person who has more of a competing or shark personality would be the person to go and tell them, hey, that's not allowed. You know, you need to watch your group. That's not how we were trained. They're going to be like, hey, you need to follow these rules. So sharks are more apt to follow the rules, and they want everyone else to also do the same thing. So that may hurt a person who is being passive or avoidant, and so that may bother them. When the sharks really got the best interest of the agency in mind, is keeping the kids safe and staying on task and doing what policy requires us. So would they just have to watch how they give or delegate that information to the other people with their word choices. When conflict resolution is urgent, when a decision is vital and we're in crisis. If we're in emergency mode, like a tornado is coming or something, crisis is coming, something bad weather, anything like that, then we need somebody to think quick, fast, and be active on their feet. And so a shark is more of a quick thinker, a rapid thinker, and they're really good in emergencies. So that is a good time to be a shark, is when we're in an emergency situation getting those needs met. And also when unpopular decisions need to be implemented. And that is like, no, we can't do this, or there's going to be some consequences for some of the choices we made. That's where I talked to you about, mentioning that administrative staff or people in leadership roles have to be a little sharky and have to make those unpopular decisions that need to be implemented. And so not everybody is in agreement with it, but they're doing it for the greater good of the agency, the greater good of the children. So you have to realize that sometimes when administrators are like, no, you can't do this, you can't go on outing, you can't do this, that, the other. That's the biggest one that I've seen in the past, is staff want to go on an outing, but if you can't control the kids in the shelter, what makes you think you should be able to take them out in public where you could lose them or something bad could happen? So that is one of the things that we like to remind people is, yeah, we definitely want to reward good behavior and get to do more fun things, but there is that accountability factor that plays a role. So it's not always fun having to sometimes be a shark, and we sure don't want to stay in the shark role at all times, but sometimes that shark personality is necessary in a crisis. Now let's look over here on the left side. Let's talk about that collaborating style, that owl style. Owls use a collaborating or a problem confrontating conflict management style. They value their goals, but they also value relationships. Owls view conflict as a problem to be solved, finding solutions to agreeable to all sides. So it's a win-win. And so the owl is not there to just be right. They want it to be right and accepted by everyone and allowing input from others. And so the advantage to being an owl is both sides get what they want to some degree through negotiation and through compromise, and collaborating and working together by everybody allowing to have input to the solution that's being provided. The disadvantage is it takes a great deal of time and effort. So sometimes when we're in a pinch and we have to make a fast decision, being that collaborating owl is not going to work. When I do think the owl is a great time to use the owl conflict style is when kiddos can't agree on what to do. Like, we're going to have an activity, we don't know what to do, we don't know what board game to play, we don't know what kind of sport we want to play, we want to do something, but we can't make up our mind. And so that is where we allow everybody to listen, to talk, and to brainstorm, not allowing anyone to overtalk them. So you don't need to just pay attention to your conflict style. So you may be an owl, but in a group, remember the children are also the different conflict styles. So you don't want a shark to totally take over the conversation if you want to get to more middle ground. And you don't want a turtle and a teddy bear not to be heard. And so you want to make sure that everybody has an opportunity to be heard and seen. That's what the owl does. They make sure that everybody has an opportunity to be heard and seen, and their feelings to be expressed. The appropriate time to use an owl style is when we're maintaining relationships. And so, gosh, we need this more than anything with our kids, don't we? Because TBRI talks to us so much about the importance of connection. And what a better way to build connection with our kiddos than by allowing them to provide verbal feedback and make choices and goals for their own lives. And so that even boils down to what board game we play, or what we do, what movie we watch, and things like that. And when time is not a concern, when we have time to really visit about things, that's really good to use the collaborating style when we have more time to talk about stuff. When trying to gain commitment through consensus building, it's also very important, because we want, again, excuse me, everybody to have the ability to be heard. And so commitment through consensus, it means allowing people to have their voices heard and their ideas shared. And when learning and trying to merge differing perspectives, when everybody has a different perspective, sometimes just trying something new. So that's kind of like, I like to use board games as an example, so we can say, everybody pick a board game, and we're going to dedicate 30 minutes to each board game over this week period. And that way, as soon as you play that one game that somebody picked out, you're going to put it away and go on to the next board game. And that way, we don't revisit that board game until everybody else has had their board game played. And that shows that you truly value all those different styles. Now let's move on to the right-hand side, which is avoiding style, the turtle. That little turtle there adopts an avoiding or withdrawing conflict management style. Whenever conflict occurs, they either shut down and withdraw, that flight, or freeze. They're going to run away, or they're going to freeze. Turtles would rather hide or ignore conflict than resolve it. So they're not going to say yes or no, they're just not going to reply. Turtles tend to give up personal goals or display passive behavior, creating a lose-lose situation. And so they tend to yield towards the dominant. They want to maintain friendships, and they're not willing to put their personal goals in direct line of offending their friendships. They stay away from issues which cause conflict and from the people they have conflict with. From a staff perspective, we see this where you see staff who are not following the rules and not violating the rules, and a turtle may see that, and it bothers them, and it gives them a grievance, but they're not going to address it until that builds up and festers and really becomes disruptive, and we'll talk about that later. And then they unhinge and release all these things that have been bothering them for a long period of time. So I like to think of that turtle shell as like a storage capacity area where the turtles can store their hurts until they're ready to get really frustrated and they blow up and talk about them. They put others' goals ahead of their own when stakes are not high or issues are trivial. So if they don't really care, they tend to just go along with the flow. When confrontation will hurt a working relationship, they will not take a stance or a opposition to somebody that they really like. If they like that staff member personally, even though they don't agree with what they're doing, they're willing to let things slide because they like that person. When there's little chance of satisfying their wants, they just kind of give up and just go with the flow because they give up. Because it's not life-threatening or a do-or-die situation. And when gathering information is more important than immediate decisions, they tend to pass or be passive in that situation. When others can be more effective in resolving a conflict, if they know that they're not good at it, they're going to let go and let somebody else handle it. And when time constraints demand a delay, they don't want to wait, so they're just going to give up to make it move along faster. An advantage: it may help to maintain a relationship that would be hurt by conflict resolution by taking time to reflect. So sometimes, it is good that those people kind of back down so that it allows somebody else time to think about it, just if decisions don't have to be made right this second. The disadvantage, though, as conflicts remain unresolved, and overuse of this style leads to other people walking all over them. And sometimes those turtles get really mad when they've been walked on, and then they too can blow up and get frustrated. But there are some appropriate times to use the turtle style, like when there is a little chance of satisfying your wants, so you don't really care if you play Uno or not, that kind of thing. When gathering information is more important than the immediate decision, we don't have to make the decision today. We're just thinking out loud. When others can more effectively resolve the conflict and you do not want to have to be part of that conflict resolution team. When time constraints demand a delay, it's useful because then we don't have to make the decision this second. We can kind of procrastinate the decision. And when confrontation is going to hurt a working relationship. If confrontation is going to hurt a working relationship, then sometimes it's better to avoid the situation and then, in all honesty, pass it off to a supervisor who can then help you work through that conflict with that staff member. Definitely don't be that turtle who just sees all of the policy violating staff ignoring the children and being on their phone and not following the rules that we have set for the kiddos, not using their TBRI, not using their ABI. Those people are actually toxic for the team, and we need our turtles, if you're a turtle style, to speak up and let us know when that happens. Now let's talk about the teddy bear, the accommodating style. Teddy bears use a smoothing or accommodating conflict management style with an emphasis on human relationships. They want to make everybody happy. They will sacrifice their personal goals to preserve harmony. They have a want to be liked by others personality, so they want to be perceived as liked and valued and a friend. They think conflict should be avoided because any conflict causes damage to relationships. They give in to others' ideas of becoming cooperative, and it results in a win-lose where the bear always loses the situation. And so they get taken advantage of. And so the advantage is it does maintain close relationships to ensure harmony, but the disadvantages kind of outweigh that. The disadvantages are giving in may not be productive, and the bear may be taken advantage of. In this instance, staff who are teddy bears, the children are not following the rules. The children are allowed to argue with one another, and usually the squeaky wheel gets the grease. So the kid who acts the worst is going to get the most reward because the staff member doesn't want to cause conflicts. They're willing to give them whatever so they don't have any conflict to deal with. So the only time it's really appropriate to use the teddy bear is when maintaining a relationship outweighs any other considerations. When suggestions and changes are not important to the accommodator, and when minimizing losses in a situation where outmatch or losing is going to occur, and when time is limited or when harmony and stability are valued. And so I think in terms of where sometimes we have a teddy bear is when kids are fighting over sharing a toy. And so unfortunately, sometimes the teddy bear may give in and let the person yelling the most have the toy, when you really need to take back and look at that whole big picture and then teach the children how to share and have that sharing opportunity message and lesson for them to where each child can take a turn, which is more of that compromising and collaborating concept. So the teddy bear, doesn't like the guilt of not being liked and not being valued. So if you do have a lot of teddy bear features, you want to make sure that you are aware of that so you can be loving and nurturing and care about relationships, but you're not going to be a doormat and get walked over and then not have any authority over the children and your coworkers if you see them misbehaving. If coworkers themselves are misbehaving or taking advantage of you and being like, Miss Bear, I need you to be the one that takes the trash out every night. Miss Bear, you're the person in charge of that. Well, you don't want it to do that every time because then you feel taken advantage of. So you want to make sure that the workload is shared appropriately and you're not being walked on by your coworkers or definitely not being walked on and put in the friend zone or the buddy zone by the children, because we're not their friends, we're not their peers, we are their guardians and we're their caretakers. And so we have a different, more assertive role that's in more of a leadership capacity. The compromising and Fox style uses concern for goals in the relationships. For both, foxes are willing to sacrifice some of their goals while persuading others to give up part of theirs. So they give a little, you give a little. Like, okay, we can both do this, but 10 minutes with my game and 10 minutes with your game, that kind of thing like that. They seek balance in giving up a bit of their goal and persuading others to give up part of theirs too, so they're more negotiating. Compromise is a big part of their personality traits. It is an assertive and cooperative style, so they are willing to express their wants and desires, but they are willing to negotiate to where the other people can also win as well. So sometimes their result is either a win-lose or a lose-lose, where everybody has to sacrifice something, but then again that turns into a win because people are learning to compromise. The advantage is relationships are maintained and the agreement is for a common good, a common goal. The disadvantage is a compromise may create a less than ideal outcome, and the game playing can result. And so literally, then they can kind of argue about that. So that can yield some arguments if it doesn't work out in their favor. Appropriate times to use a Fox style is when it's important and complex issues leave no clear or simple solutions, so then you have to negotiate. And when conflicting people are equal in power and have strong interests in different solutions. And so I've seen that on shift before. If you've got two people and like one says, well, we need to go to the gym, and the other one says, we need to go to the playground. Well, does it always have to be all or none? In that instance, I think if we're going to do outside time, we could have 30 minutes in the gym and 30 minutes in the playground, and trying to work together as a team rather than just being, hey, we're going to do this. And so that makes it different by making sure that you engage your other team members in finding out what they need or what they feel that they could contribute to the group activity, and planning your activities together. That would be the best way to do things with other staff. And when there's no time restrictions. To be a Fox, you've got to have a lot more freedom and time and flexibility to have that opportunity to discuss and negotiate your goals and desires for an outcome. So what did you learn about your default management style? With the different types of animals that were there, it's harder for us it's easier to use them as just kind of a metaphor for what the conflict style is, but I want to look at the words this time. On that avoiding, accommodating, collaborating, competing, and compromising styles, and I did kind of move them in different areas this time too, just to kind of show that each one of them have value in their own right. And so one of the things that I learned early on is that your styles can change. How I was 30 years ago when I started at this agency is different than how I am now. Some of that has to do with age, some of that has to do with experience, and some of that has to do with tools in my toolbox. I have more tools in my toolbox. So now I have the ability to be more compromising and collaborating than I did before. With that avoiding and accommodating, I kind of think I actually had more of that when I was younger and when I first started. And then competing, I didn't have that as much. I wasn't by nature a competing person. And I learned over time and over training to add to my toolbox, that as a supervisor that I have to have more of that competing, more of that more direct, shark capability in order for me to be in a supervisor role. And so that was not natural for me to take on that personality trait and that dynamic, but that is something that I had to add to my toolbox to make sure that I could be a more well-rounded supervisor. So those are some things that I learned personally. And so if you were to think in terms of yourself, write those down. Take some time to write those down and how each one of these styles benefit you or inhibit you from having good relationships and good work balance in your job right now. And so that's a good task that you could take on and discuss maybe with your colleagues if you notice that there's something that you need to work on, by using statements like, can we collaborate on this? Can we compromise on this? Let's talk about this. Let's make some choices together. Here's a good reflection question. What efforts might you need to make to adjust your default conflict style in order to engage our youth? For instance, if staff were to be a teddy bear with the children, and children were very manipulative, is that a good style to work with manipulative children who are sneaky and tricky and also have kind of a bullying component to them? No. You do not want a teddy bear to be their main group leader. Why? Because the teddy bear is going to allow the child who has the most power to make all of the decisions. The child who is the most difficult to deal with, they're going to try to be more accommodating them to decrease that conflict. And that's going to cause some of the other children who fall in that teddy bear or turtle category, or even the compromising category, the fox category. It's going to cause some of those children to be resentful and hurt because they are not being able to be heard and seen. And so that is not good. Also, if you've got a staff member who's just a shark, who's just like, we're going to do it this way, we're going to do this, and there's nothing else, there's no resolve, we're going to play this game, and I've made all the choices for you today, and you don't have any ability to choose what happens in your day. That's not good for the kids either. You want somebody who talks to the kids ahead of time. How many of you like art? How many of you like to play sports? How many of you like to sing? How many of you like to draw? How many of you like to play Uno? How many of you like to play Scrabble? And so finding out what the kids' interests are and being able to celebrate each person's interests when you're their group leader is important. And being able to remember those things is also equally important. And then if you can reflect now too on the coworkers you work with the most, what is their communication style, and does that rub you the wrong way? Does it clash? And so how can you better address that person to get your needs met using words like collaboration and compromise, and thinking in terms too of our TBRI, can we have two choices with that? Can we have a redo? Those kind of things. Making sure that even with your coworker, if they're a shark and they're just kind of putting a lot of demands out there, being able to address that and say, hey, that's a little too competing language for me. Can we talk, kind of talk it over and compromise and collaborate and get a decision where everyone can benefit? So being able to use the tools in our toolbox and share those ideas. And if that person is non-receptive and they only see their point of view and you can't get them to a compromising level, then it's good to bring in a supervisor to kind of help you with that. Same thing with the kid. If you can't really get to them and your communication style is not meeting them where it needs to meet them to get some kind of change, then it's better to sometimes ask for help, and then we can have a group meeting and kind of resolve that together as a team with all the parties involved. 7 stages of behavior escalation. What do we really look for? Number 1, calm. Person relatively calm is cooperative. They're easy to get along with. They're smiling. They're happy. 2 is a trigger. Trigger. Persons experiencing unresolved conflicts. These triggers the person's behavior to escalate. And so triggers is something we ask on a kid's intake. What are your calmers? What are your escalators or triggers? And triggers could be people not sharing, people staring at you, people using loud voices. Sometimes a trigger is the word no. Triggers can also be, sarcastic treatment or belittling, getting too close to a kid who's been victimized by physical or sexual abuse. A trigger could be just putting your hands on them, or being too close to their spatial boundaries. Those could be a trigger. Agitation. A person is increasingly unfocused and upset. Agitation is like the little kids up front. See the little kid with the pink hat, and he's yelling and kind of fussing, and then the little girl, her face is fully red and she's super mad. She's already to the next level. So agitation is when they're ramping up, and so you're going to hear fussing. You're going to see more movement. Their voices may get louder. They're breathing a little bit heavier, and they're a little unfocused. They can't really focus their thoughts and direct their language, and so they're upset. Acceleration is when the conflict remains unresolved and the person focuses on the conflict. So then they're super mad. They are able to kind of communicate what the conflict is, and they're hyper-focused on the conflict. And then there's the peak, which is when a person is out of control. They exhibit severe behavior like screaming, yelling, hitting, kicking, throwing things, breaking property, crying, and also kiddos can even still go through those realms and then kind of withdraw and shut down and just refuse to engage with anybody and communication of any kind. Then you have de-escalation, where the child vents in the peak stage. The person displays confusion. Severity of the peak behaviors starts to subside or come down, so they're not yelling, screaming, throwing things as much. It's reducing slightly to the point where eventually it stops. And then you have the recovery phase, where the person displays willingness to participate in other activities and or talk about the situation. So that kind of covers the 7 stages of a behavior that escalates. So we go from calming to triggering to agitation to acceleration to the peak to de-escalation and to recovery. And so the next slide is going to give us more of a visual of that. Here is a visual representation of the stages of escalation and anger. Let's look at the right first. Now, we just covered these words a minute ago. Calm, trigger, agitation, acceleration, peak, de-escalation, and then recovery. Notice the intensity, and it kind of looks like a volcano. Some say it kind of looks like a roller coaster. And so that's kind of what it feels like for staff being on this ride, or other children even being on this ride, or even the child who is experiencing the escalation of anger. You get that kind of jitters in your stomach, and then you can't breathe, and then you're sweating, and then you're screaming. And then finally you wind down, and then you're able to breathe at a normal rate, and you feel calm again. And so we've got to realize that length of time, that item on the bottom, that length of time varies based on the person and the experience. There's no time frame for being frustrated or angry, and the intensity varies again based on situation and triggers. And so one of the things that we got to account for triggering is, our staff re-triggering the behavior to continue. So are you over threatening a kid? Are you not using your TBRI to try to get their basic needs met? So remember, with TBRI, when we see a triggering behavior, we want to be in close proximity to the child. And that's part of our TBRI. We want to be in close proximity to the child. So we're playing activities or being in the activities with our group. So then if 2 kids are not able to share or are struggling emotionally with one another, we're able to then intervene immediately and calm those 2 children down, or see when what is triggering them, and talking to them, of reminding them too, again, of, are you hungry? Are you thirsty? Are you tired? Can you tell me what you need? Can you tell me what you want? By using your words. And so remember some of those words that we use that are actually on posters that are in both buildings, that talk about, what do you want? What do you need? hungry, thirsty, tired, sleepy? Is somebody bullying you? That's something to take into consideration. Are people leaving you out? See, that's a simple trigger that we've learned in the past, where staff will sometimes allow the kids who talk more and who are nicer to them or sweeter to them get to be more of a leader. And so that's really not fair, because then we're not sharing that role of leadership. And so oftentimes those kids who are easier to get along with are getting to choose all the activities and all the functions that we do. You don't realize how triggering that can be for other children. And you got to consider there are other children who have a lot of other things going on, such as what I've talked about in other trainings called, alphabet soup. And that would be like your autism, your ADHD, your OCD, your ODD, all these different diagnoses that have kind of acronyms to go with them. That alphabet soup can be a triggering situation, because those kids have social features that make it more difficult for them to interact with others, and so they get left out. And so we want to make sure that we minimize those triggering activities by being fully present for the kiddos, that connection part of the TBRI. Now let's look at the anger volcano. I really like to talk about the anger volcano because it actually talks about all the components involved in building up anger into that volcano. And so anger is neither a positive or a negative emotion, but it can be uncomfortable for us, and definitely uncomfortable for the children or teens that are experiencing it. If anger is not controlled, it can erupt and blow up, just kind of like that anger cloud above the volcano. And it can erupt into violence, or verbal abuse or physical abuse, or destruction of property, self-harm. It can do a lot of different things. Like the lava from a volcano that builds the island of the anger volcano, its purpose, it actually has a purpose. Anger indicates that there's something else wrong and going on that we're not aware of. It's under the surface. So anger is actually a secondary emotion. It's not a primary emotion. So it's a secondary emotion, which means there are other emotions that are at play. It takes other emotions to cause anger to be, anger is more of like a visible symptom of something else. And so it's important to challenge the anger, to see what is behind it by asking the children, do they know what's behind their anger? I like to even draw a volcano with them. Draw this volcano with them and say, what would be down at the bottom of your anger volcano? And then talk to them about how to work on those features as a life skill. These are common emotions that are hidden behind anger. And so a lot of our kids, if we especially think about foster care kids, suffer from fear of the unknown, fear of being away from everything you know and love, and your whole world has changed. Where you sleep, where you go to school, where you live, who you live with, all those things play into a factor. And then you have some other emotions that are triggering anger, which are like envy. And envy could be kids that get to have visitation and you don't, kids that have the casa that you don't, kids that get to go home, or kids who've been here longer and have more things than you do. Sometimes kids have guilt. They have guilt that they've actually caused the removal of their family, and they're struggling with issues of guilt. Shame. There is sometimes some shame involved. Shame of being in a shelter environment. Shame of being a foster kid. Shame of the circumstances that you got here and the family struggles that you had prior to coming here. Remember, we deal with kids who've suffered physical abuse, sexual abuse, emotional abuse, sometimes human trafficking, and definitely drug and alcohol exposure, domestic violence. There are so many factors that would feel shameful to individuals if other people knew their history. Also, feelings of rejection. Have they been rejected by their family and kicked out? Have they been rejected by a foster home and kicked out? And also just getting rejected as a friend or a group member. Just general frustration. That could be down to just not being able to share, not being able to be a group leader, not being able to pick something like a game that we're playing, or being able to make any decisions. Those are really frustrating. If you were to be in a situation where you were powerless and you couldn't make any decisions, you would get frustrated as well. Following schedules that they're not accustomed to can be very frustrating. Being in the foster care system can also be very overwhelming. Not only have they changed schools and changed to our environment, now they have a bunch of rules that they have to follow. And they have to get caught up in school. And traditionally, most of our kids have struggled in school from the begin with, and now we're expecting them to go to class every day and not just stay home and then actually do their homework. That can be overwhelming. Plus, they're having to go to court, they're having to go to counseling, they're having to do Kansas assessments, go to doctor's appointments, dental appointments, visual appointments. There's a lot of stuff going on with them, and sometimes they get visitation, sometimes they don't, sometimes parents don't show up. There's a lot of things involved in that can be very overwhelming. Jealousy is another thing that they might suffer from, and that could stem again from things that kids who've been here longer have more stuff, or they're jealous that some kids have visitation and they don't get that, or they're jealous of, privileges and things that the other kids have had in their lives or they've experienced. And so jealousy can be a big thing. And that's why we don't allow boyfriend-girlfriend relationships, girlfriend-girlfriend, boyfriend-boyfriend, whatever, is because of that relationship jealousy. We don't want to have that in our building. A sense of injustice. Injustice, again, boils back down to maybe a kid doesn't get to be the line leader. Maybe the kid doesn't get to pick the game we play. Maybe the kid doesn't get to pick the movie we play. Maybe that kid doesn't get to go first often. And if you tend to show favoritism toward another child, the other children will feel a sense of injustice. And so we've got to make sure that we are sharing those good, positive leadership skills with all the children, not just the children who you favor. We shouldn't have favorites in the building. Disappointment is a big thing. They can be disappointed, number one, that parents didn't show up, disappointed that they can't go home, disappointed that what they wanted didn't happen in court. There's a lot of disappointment to be had. And also there's disappointments around holidays, around seasonal things that were a family friendly or a family gathering type of experience. It's disappointing not to be with those people during those holiday times, so we have to take that into consideration. Feelings of embarrassment. Some kids get embarrassed because of their history and why they're here. Some kids get embarrassed because of small things that have happened to them. Like sometimes our kids come in with head loss, or sometimes our kids don't have the social skills and manners that they need to function, and other kids taunt them about that. And so we need to make sure that there's no bullying going on, and that all of our kids learn that we all make mistakes, including staff, including adults, and that it's our goal to live and learn from them. So being embarrassed can also really cause some anger issues, especially also if you have to redirect the kid and ask him for a redo and you don't do it with respect and kindness. In the TBRI we talk about it's all about connection. It's all about connection and empowerment. And then we do correction. And so with our connection, we're not going to humiliate the children. We're not going to embarrass the children to get them to change their behavior. We want them to have that ability to make choices and to make compromises. Remember the two choices and the two compromises. And we want it to be done in a positive light, not kind of like a win-lose situation, my way or the highway. And so we want them to be able to benefit from positive self-regulation. So try not to make your redirection of the kid make them look like a bad guy. Try to do it as an educational experience. And then, of course, helplessness. What foster kid would not feel helpless? You're in a situation where you have absolutely no control and everything that you know and love has changed. And so that would make anyone feel helpless. And so it's such a factor that we have to work on in counseling with the kiddos, and we need to work on their ability to use their words to get their needs met and expressed. And sometimes it's just writing a note to our case managers that the child needs to talk to their other case worker if they're not returning phone calls. Some workers with the other groups where they come from to us, we are really good about returning phone calls, but to be honest, sometimes they're not. And so we don't want to promise things that we can't deliver. And so that does give the kiddos a sense of helplessness when those things occur. Traits and factors that may trigger aggression. Of course, we have organic conditions such as psychiatric illness that are genetic in nature. That could be anything from things like, ADHD, autism, oppositional defiant disorder, obsessive compulsive disorder, bipolar disorder, manic depression, all the different psychiatric issues that may cause a child to have a higher sense of anger or behavioral issues is associated with anger and impulse control. And then you compound that with substance abuse. Substance abuse that they were exposed to where they didn't choose to use drugs, but they were exposed to drugs in the home setting, drugs and or alcohol, or kiddos who are in their tweens and teens and they're already experimenting with drugs and alcohol use. That can be a big factor. Prior history of family violence, we've noticed more kids tend to be aggressive that came from a home of profound physical violence towards the children and or domestic violence, where a lot of people are cussing and yelling at each other, throwing things at each other, hitting each other, a lot of aggression in the home. Some of our kiddos have even been encouraged to fight, and the parents found that like rewarding to videotape and show their friends. I mean, it's just disturbing, some of the things that have happened to our kiddos that have these family histories of extreme violence. In addition to that, just a culture of violence that we have in our world today. A lot of people, we have a culture of violence where it's okay to talk real ugly to people and just be really boisterous and kind of threatening and kind of bow up at people and, threaten harm. We need to teach them that that's not acceptable and that's not how people should behave. Highly stressful situations, of course, which is like removal from the home, involvement with CPS or the police, court proceedings, compliance with services such as juvenile probation services, things along those lines, and school problems. All ages and all genders of kids are going to have aggression. It's not exclusive to boys or exclusive to girls. Anybody can experience it. Certain feelings of powerlessness, fear, grief, feeling of injustice, boredom, humiliation. Boredom. That is a factor. Some of our kiddos that have like autism, ADHD, things along those lines, when they get bored and disengaged, sometimes they get disruptive and can trigger aggression within themselves and other people because they're picking, and it's because they don't have anything better to do. And so that's why we tell you to play with your group and to be conscious of how long their attention spans are. It's not really based on age, it's based on their developmental levels. So you may have a 17-year-old who's an unmedicated child who's struggling with autism and, let's say, ADHD. That child's attention span is going to be very, very low as compared to a peer who is not suffering from those psychiatric and or illnesses. And so that's a big factor. And humiliation is the same thing as embarrassment. When kids get embarrassed and they get, humiliated in any way, made fun of, like when our kiddos have an accident in their britches or something like that, we don't want to be like, oh my gosh, I smell somebody who's real stinky, that kind of thing. Don't bring that to their attention. They don't need that. Not even if they're a toddler, they don't need that. You don't have to announce it to the world that somebody has pooped their britches or wet their pants or tooted or farted or whatever you want to call it. You don't have to bring attention to those kind of things. If you see a child who is picking their nose or picking their behind or anything that's just not appropriate, you can pull them aside and talk to them about the way to handle things and address that without humiliating them or embarrassing them in front of the other peers and people in the room. Of course, access to weapons of any kind. And of course, in our building, we don't have weapons, but we do have things like scissors, rulers, things that are sharp objects, things that can be converted into a weapon. We want to make sure that baseball bats and jump ropes and things like that are all put away. And again, back to scissors, razors, things like that the kids would have for grooming purposes and or craft purposes. All those things need to be put away so they can't really harm somebody else with them or themselves with them. Exposure to domestic violence, we've talked about that earlier. Domestic violence is such a precursor because kids learn to model behavior in the home. And if that is something that they've seen and that's all they know, then they're going to mimic that. So the first chance they get to not get along with somebody, they may lash out and hit somebody or throw something or say ugly words. And then, of course, a personal history of child abuse and neglect. They're more prone to aggression. Again, let's look at these warning signs. Common signs of agitation. Again, let's raised voice, high-pitched voice. And a raised voice and a high-pitched voice could be screaming, yelling with a deep voice even. Hearing that stuff like, no, quit, stop, leave me alone, shut up. You're listening for all those kind of things. Usually you start with those milder words and then it gets louder and gets into cussing. Sometimes a kid's speaking really fast because they're so frustrated they're trying to get all their thoughts out at once. Some kiddos may be breathing kind of heavy, pacing. Their face could turn red. They could also move their hands a lot, doing excessive hand gestures, excessive sweating, fidgeting with stuff, fidgeting with themselves, just kind of like, moving their hands a lot, can't sit still. getting up and down a lot. You know we're in a danger zone, and there's a big warning sign when a kid balls their fist up ready to hit somebody. So when you see kids with balled fists and they're got their hands ready to punch somebody, that's going to be a big red flag. You should have intervened back when the child started to raise their voice. So these are kind of layered in stages. If raised voice is ground zero, and then we start to escalate down to the bottom of verbal abusive and yelling, we should be able to start fixing it once you hit pacing. We should be able to kind of get that under control, if at all possible, by doing self-regulation, the calming centers, and practicing TBRI with our connected engagement, our calming engagement, our empowerment format, where we're asking them if they are hungry, thirsty, tired, or they need something to eat or drink. And then also if they need to get their energy out by going outside and walking laps or breathing and things along those lines. And so in addition to balled fists, kids could be shaking, fidgeting, their legs could be fidgeting and kind of shaking, erratic movements, kind of throwing their arms up and down, kind of looking real frustrated, pushing stuff, throwing things, hitting or kicking things, aggressive posturing, which is kind of bowing up like they're going to hit you, and again, verbally abusive, cussing and or yelling. Those are all things that can happen. But again, if staff are doing their job very effectively and they're using their TBRI, you're going to be able to stop that. Once you hit that raised voice, that high-pitched voice, you need to be right there in that top section to stop it before it hits these other symptoms that we're looking for. So what is verbal de-escalation? Verbal de-escalation is an intervention used for use when people who are at risk for aggression. It's basically using calm language along with other communication techniques to diffuse, redirect, or de-escalate a conflict situation. Our agency uses TBRI. And so over on the left, you're going to see the three main platforms of TBRI, which is connecting at the center. That should be the most centered thing that we do. And with connection, we use mindful awareness. Where are we? Are we being calm? Are the other children around us being calm? Is the environment clean and organized and situated in a way that everybody's going to be safe? And then using our engagement strategies. Remember our engagement strategies of playful engagement, structured engagement, calming engagement, and then finally protective engagement. But to be honest, we should hardly ever have to hit protective engagement phase. I would like our agency to stay within playful and structured engagement phase if at all possible, because that means that we are being fully present with our kids. We have built a strong connection with our children, and we are staying with our groups and being present and being very proactive in the process. And so within playful engagement, we're just kind of redirecting kids in a playful light, not using sarcasm, not using anything to make them feel embarrassed or humiliated, but just trying to get them to do some redos and to change some of their actions in more of a playful tone. Remember, our voices are sweet and soft and melodic. They're rhythmic. They don't have kind of like a stern structure to them, but they're, nurturing and encouraging. Then you go into that structured engagement to where you're talking less, you're less playful, but you're more firm, but you're not yelling. You're still not yelling. You're talking less. Your voice is dropped down just a little bit, not to be in a deep, brutal tone or anything like that, but to be in a more serious tone. And you're going to be giving some of those choices, some of those redos, some of those I'm going to offer you choice A and B, and if you don't like any of those, we can compromise and change one of those choices into a third alternative. And so remember, that's some of the things that we're going to do. But during the connecting phase, we always talk about what is the situation around that particular blow up, what caused it, were they you got to look at the whole environmental factors within that structured engagement. You want to look at, was there enough toys out? Was everybody sharing? Was there clearly defined rules? Were we transitioning kids effectively with that 5-minute warning kind of thing and letting them know that we're about to transition activities? Are we picking things up and putting them back where they belong? Are we keeping all the child's personal belongings safe and put away in their room, not in the general play area, so they won't get lost and or taken by other children? Those are some things that we've got to take into consideration. And then you go into, with the calming engagement, you're going to be using our calming corners. You're going to be doing breathing techniques, some co-regulation with the kiddos, like walking or wall push-ups, or, like using that calming corner again, doing some time-ins and talking it out. It's about talking it out. Again, it's not about punishment. It's not about being punitive and lecturing the kids or anything like that. It's about building that relationship, figuring out what is the underlying factor under that volcano that's causing them to feel angry, and then addressing it. So let's go from connecting down to empowering, because that's really another strong base. Ecological strategies is our environment. And so our environment, is our environment clean, organized? Is there fun things to do? Do we have our calming centers in place? Are we using our calming centers? Are we using our scheduled properly? Are we following the schedule and the routines of the shelter? Are we changing our activities so they stay enriching and attention maintaining for the kiddos? So like you're going from like a physical activity of being outside and running and playing, or being in the gym and running and playing, or being on a bike and riding and playing, to going from that activity to a calmer activity, to do a little wind down there, to coming inside and doing a craft or doing a board game or something along those lines that's quieter. And then maybe from going from that activity, to like something like a meal or a snack or something along those lines, and then being able to do something else that either needs to be high energy or low energy based on the environment of the kids. You need to see if the kids are getting restless because you're doing crafts or you're doing a board game and they're getting too restless and starting to argue with each other, then that should be your key to say, hey, we need to go outside and burn up some energy. We're too rowdy. We need to burn up some energy. So we go to the gym and we use the tumble mats, or we do this or we do that. And when you go out to the playground and you go out to the gym, it's better to do activities that are coordinated and planned. If you just go out there and freestyle it every single time, it loses its rewarding value, it loses its sense of direction, because our kids do not know how to play. And so we have to be the teachers of play. So it's important for us to be out there to show them how to use the gym, show them how to use the playground, show them how to use our field day activities, show them how to ride a bike, show them those things. Then you get into those physiological strategies, which are their sleeping habits, their eating habits. Are we having our 3 meals a day? Are we having our 3 snacks a day? Are we sitting with them during our meals, during our group time, and talking with them and building that communication with them and building that rapport and encouraging them to try new foods and to, keeping that contact going, and trying to figure out ways to get them to eat healthy. So those are all key factors. Making sure that we stay hydrated. Being dehydrated is a big factor with kids losing their ability to concentrate and also getting frustrated. And so staying hydrated. Some kids are not water drinkers. We got to remember that. So we need our flavored water and things like that. Some of our sugar-free items that we need to encourage them to drink and to stay hydrated. Then it falls back into that top category of correcting, where you've got your proactive strategies and your responsive strategies. And so your proactive strategies are that prevention phase. What can you do to be proactive? Number one is you can be consistent, follow routines and schedules like we're supposed to. You can also be attentive to time and time management, and also those transitional warnings that we need to make with kiddos. You're using those. And are you playing with your group? Are you active with your group? Are you showing your kids how to play, and you're being a good role model for them? Making sure that they learn to share and learn not to tease somebody else for not being as successful in an activity as they are, because everybody's in a learning phase at some portion of their lives. And just by you being very physically present with them and very attentive to them, you're going to catch any of those behavioral problems early on and be able to fix it with that playful engagement, structured engagement, before it gets to calming engagement and or protective engagement. And that's with our responsive strategies. Are you responding in a therapeutic way using TBRI with your playful engagement voice that's warm and happy and kind, with your structured voice that's not condescending, not critical, not punitive, not militant, but it's redirecting, and then it's telling them the importance of why you need them to change their behavior. Is it a safety risk? Is it something that would damage relationships? They need to know that information. They're not able to figure that out on their own, so we have to explain it to them. So always we will, of course, have more TBRI training, as we do TBRI training 12 hours annually year after orientation. And of course we have the TBRI posters that are and wall art that are in both buildings. And so if you ever need more assistance and more training in that area, always feel free to ask management, because they'd be glad to kind of help you practice more TBRI skills. We never use physical force or restraint in de-escalation. Here's why non-restraint approaches are generally better during anger outbursts for foster kids. Many foster kids have trauma tied to being physically controlled. A lot of foster youth have experienced abuse, neglect, or forced removal. Physical restraint can re-trigger trauma memories, feel like punishment or danger, not help. It can escalate fear, more aggression, not less. And to a traumatized brain, restraint can feel like I'm not safe, even if the adult's intent is to be protective. Number 2, anger is often a stress response, not a misbehavior. Remember that volcano. Anger is at the top. It is a secondary symptom of other emotions. So, outbursts are usually about overwhelm, loss of control, fear, shame, or confusion. Non-restraint strategies like giving space, using a calm voice, a presence without force, being that connection, that TBRI connection to that kiddo, can help the child's nervous system settle instead of pushing it into a fight or flight response. That's why we're saying use TBRI and stay calm. Use the different stages of TBRI to help a child learn to process their anger. Item number 3. It supports emotional regulation skills. When adults avoid restraint and model calm, remember, adults must stay calm first. Kids learn how to self-regulate over time. They build words for feelings instead of using their bodies. Remember, use our words. Remember us saying that to the kiddos. This message becomes, big feelings are okay, you're still safe. So it's okay to have big feelings. You just want to minimize how you express your big feelings, so it's not in a physical state. If we use our words, words don't hurt property or people, and they become safe. Restraint may not stop behavior in the moment, but it does teach coping skills. It often delays learning, so that's why we don't teach restraint. All you're doing is maybe inhibiting the behavior for a moment, but it doesn't teach a child self-control. In addition to that, restraint is also very dangerous, and you can hurt a child or hurt yourself, and so that's why our agency has chosen to be non-restraint. So again, we never use physical force or restraint to change a child's behavior. Number 4, it builds trust and attachment. Trust is fragile for foster kids or for kids in general. Non-restraint responses show that adults can keep them safe without hurting or overpowering them. You don't have to change behavior by hurting a kid or overpowering a kid. Boundaries exist without violence. I don't have to harm you for you to be kept in control. And so we're not teaching our kids that domestic violence or hitting kids or beating kids is what they need to do when they grow up. So we're showing healthy, appropriate boundaries by teaching them that violence itself is not going to be helpful when you are in an anger outburst. Trust is essential for healing and long-term behavior change. That's another thing that building attachment helps yield to kiddos. It reduces power struggles. Restraint often turns an outburst into a battle for control with kind of a power struggle situation with the kiddos. But non-restraint approaches de-escalates instead of winning and making this a win-lose situation. It shifts the focus from control to connection. So it prevents the cycle of anger, restraint, shame, and then more anger. So that is why our agency is chosen to be a non-restraint agency, and we do not use any form of restraint or seclusion or isolation, anything along those lines to control a child's behavior. What are the aspects of communication? We've got body language, tone of voice, and word choice. So which one has the most influence? Let's break it down. It really depends on the situation, but tone usually wins. Here's the breakdown without the myths. Body language. It's most powerful when emotions are high. You're face to face. You've got trust, attraction, or authority is being judged. People believe what they see. If your body says I'm bored while your words say I care, your body wins. Tone. The quiet, most valuable player in most interactions, or MVP in most interactions, conveys emotion, intent, sarcasm, warmth, confidence, especially dominant in spoken communication, such as calls, meetings, and arguments. Same words, different tone, completely different meaning. Tone tells people how to take your words. And then you have word choice, most influential when communication is complex in ideas, when we're writing something like text, emails, contracts, or speeches, and when precision actually matters. Words shape understanding, but on their own, they're easiest to override by tone and body language. So it's not just what we say, it's how we say it. And that's why things are really easily misinterpreted by our kids, because we can easily say, no, I'm not mad at you, while, giving somebody the evil eye or having a frowny face. We've often talked about having, like a face that doesn't match your tone, words, and meaning, because you're not smiling and you have a real flat affect or an RBF face or something like that. And so we have to really watch our face and what our facial expressions is conveying. Let's look at these images for nonverbal communication. What are these images really saying? It would be easy for each one of us to look at all the different pictures and interpret them a different way from the other person. Some are happy, some look mad, some look sad, some look surprised, some look scared, some look content. It's different for every person and their ability to interpret it. But what if our signals don't work? What if our ability to read these signals don't work? We often think in terms of some of the kiddos that we deal with that have neurodivergent issues, and then they can't necessarily read facial expressions. And so it's important that our nonverbal communication and our verbal communication match each other. That's why earlier we talked about using our full body language, but also our facial body language. So if we're saying, I'm so glad for you, but we have a facial expression like the guy in the black shirt with gritted teeth, are you really glad for them? No, you're not glad for them. Or maybe the guy who's shouting next to the guy with the gritted teeth, is he glad for you? No, he's not glad for you. He could be being sarcastic and making fun of you or taunting you. So we need to think in terms of, does our face look calm? Does it look like we have the ability to express the emotion that the child needs at that moment? Because remember, children they're feeding off of whatever emotion we're putting out there. So if we're frustrated or disruptive or sarcastic or hateful or rude, they're going to be feeding off of that, and it's going to impact them whether they are afraid of us or whether they want to join us and also attain some of that negativity themselves. So with this nonverbal communication, it's very, very important what our faces look like. We've talked about that before in staff meetings, of being cautious if you have RBI or if you are a sarcastic kind of person. Let's do this activity together. Body language can escalate tension. Let's match the body language to its message. And so instead of clicking anywhere on the screen for your answers, I've already done the activity for you. So let's look at number 1, shoulder shrugging. Shoulder shrugging can be seen as uncaring or unknowing. That letter F at the bottom there. Jaw set with clenched teeth. That could look like not being open-minded or not listening. You're just not interested in the situation. Finger pointing can be seen as accusing or threatening. A fake smile. A fake smile can be seen as mocking or uncaring or being sarcastic. Excessive gesturing, pacing, fidgeting, or weight shifting can show anxiety. Touching, even when culturally appropriate, like reaching out to touch somebody, it could be seen as hostility or threatening. So, like we talked about in the TBRI training films, how they encouraged people to touch people's faces, even to kind of brush people's hair out of their face, and how I told us in our environment here that we would want to make sure that we get permission to do that before we touch somebody. So, would you like a hug? Can I get the hair out of your face? Can I touch your forehead and get your hair out of your face? Letting people know when you're going to touch them is very important. Would you like to hold my hand? Do you want to sit next to me? That kind of thing. So offering more input before you touch someone is very, very important, because that hostility or threatening can back somebody up into a corner and they may lash out and hit you because they are in fight or flight mode. Let's try to do this activity. Try to look as non-threatening as possible. How to convey calm. And so let's look at the girl there on the right that says how to convey calm. Her face looks pretty calm to me. She's smiling. Her eyebrows are not furrowed. She has kind of a peaceful look on her face. But then let's look at the chart on the left. We see the girl who's happy and laughing. Well, that doesn't look threatening at all. And then we see the boy who's scared. He's scared. And so you can see that he's kind of backed up. He's got his hands up to push something away. That could be a little bit threatening to some kids because his hands are up. And that could be a little scary. But he himself looks scared. The angry girl, she's got her arms folded and she's got real cross eyes and she's looking real irritated. And so that could be scary to a child. Now, the girl who's excited, she looks happy and she's smiling and her teeth are very visible, but her hands are up. And so that particular expression could actually be confusing to kids. And the guy that's puzzled, he looks puzzled, but he kind of has like a smug smirk on his face with his hand up like he doesn't care, he's confused. That could also be a situation that's misinterpreted. So that feeling of excited, puzzled, and scared can be misrepresented or misread with kids just because there's not some other context cues that go with them. So how do we look non-threatening as possible with our kids? Number one, appear calm and self-assured even if you don't feel it. Maintain limited eye contact. Don't stare the kids down. Try to maintain a neutral facial expression. Place your hands in front of your body in an open and relaxed position. Don't do your arms crossed, and don't, or if you talk with your hands, try to regulate where you don't talk with both hands. Be at the same eye level as young people if possible, not necessarily in their face, but encourage the child to be seated next to you, or if you're standing up, if they're standing up, you can stand up, but don't be so close that you're invading their personal body space. But remember that mirroring that we talked about in TBRI, behavior matching and mirroring, sitting down when they're sitting down, pacing when they're pacing, walking when they're walking, standing when they're standing, but not in a confrontational stance. So being very mindful that you have that you convey calmness on your face and with your arms and your posture when you're working with kids and speaking with kiddos when they're frustrated or annoyed. Which position do we see as less aggressive? Well, we should all understand this. Why? Because we can see that the lady in the top picture is yelling and pointing to the child who's crying to just go to the calming corner, and that's where you need to relax. Well, that's not therapeutic at all. She's demanding that the child go there, and she's not being part of the process, and she's not trying to calm the child down. You can see that her face is physically frustrated and upset, which is making the child feel worse than she did to begin with. Where the other staff member down on the bottom is comforting a child who looks frustrated. Rather than telling her just to go to the calming corner and work it out and not being with her and part of the process, this staff member is saying, hey, would you like to come have a time in with me and let's talk about this? And then offering that comforting back touch if possible, but getting that permission ahead of time to say, hey, would you like me to pat you on the back? Sometimes a good pat on the back is good when you're feeling frustrated or scared. Just having the presence to say, would you like to come sit with me? Not necessarily even saying time in, but would you like to come sit with me? I know you seem frustrated, angry, or sad. Let's talk about it. I'm here for you, and I'm here to listen. I want to make you feel better. TBRI, trust-based relational intervention. treats body language as a huge, often louder than words, especially for kids or adults with trauma histories. Your body communicates safety or threats. In TBRI, regulation comes before correction. So remember how we talk about being calm first, self-regulation, before we teach co-regulation? So let's repeat that. In TBRI, regulation comes before correction. A dysregulated child is constantly scanning for danger, so your posture, your face, your movements matter. Even your tone of voice, everything that you do, their child is watching for the slightest detail of disruption. So TBRI tells us to have soft eyes. Have that relaxed gaze, not a hard staring. Have a calm face, neutral or warm expression. Have a non-threatening posture. So have an open stance. Your shoulders need to be relaxed. You need to have slow, predictable movements. Even if your words are kind, a tense body language style can signal that the child needs to be unsafe, that you're not a safe person. Number 2, get on the child's level. Remember that behavior matching. Power differences feel bigger to kids with trauma, so if you're hovering over a kid, that says a lot. So TBRI encourages us to sit or kneel instead of towering over the child. Turning our body slightly sideways is less confrontational, so don't do what they call, like a face-off, where you're like one-to-one, matching them, like having your body posture the same as their body posture exactly. Turn your body just to the side just a little bit. Keeping your hands visible and relaxed, this helps the child's nervous system stay regulated. So making sure that you don't have clenched fists, making sure that your hands look relaxed. Proximity matters. Closeness can feel comforting or overwhelming. You've got to monitor the child's body language and what they're saying to understand where you need to be based on their needs. So it depends on the child. TBRI actually teaches caregivers, and we've learned that in training, to watch the child's cues, like leaning in versus pulling away. If we lean in towards them and they pull away from us, then adjust your distance respectfully and get back just a little bit. Ask permission whenever a personal touch might help. Would you like a hug? Or would a hug help right now? Could I give you a pat on the back? You want to sit next to me? That kind of thing. The child's body language leads, and the adult should follow based on what the child's body language or their verbal language is telling you. Match regulation. Don't escalate. So one of the core ideas, as a regulated adult regulates the child. So remember, we said that last time in our last training. A calm staff yields a calm adult is what we said last time. That means if you slow your breathing, if you lower your voice, if you keep your movements measured so they're not sharp and exaggerated, avoiding sudden gestures or sharp pointing, keeping your body calm tells the child's nervous system that you're safe and you've got them. You're going to keep them safe. 5, behavior is communication. TBRI views body language from the child as information, not defiance. Let me restate that. That's so important. TBRI views body language from the child as information, not defiance. Things like avoiding eye contact, fidgeting or freezing, clenched fists, or rigid posture are signs of stress, fear, or unmet needs, not a bad attitude. Karen Purvis said it best. It's there at the bottom. Behavior is the language of children who have lost their voices. And so the children can't always tell us in their words what they need. So sometimes we have to remind them to use their words rather than their anger. And so that's important for us when we're teaching them self-regulation through co-regulation, guiding them by using our words and expressing our words for what we need to get our needs met. I found this personal space chart. I thought it would be good to kind of help our kids even learn what personal space is about. Remember on TBRI on the video, they had the hula hoop thing where it kind of emphasized how close people can get to you. But I like this one because it talks about space from people that we know to people that we don't know. And so stand by me or stand back. That's kind of our concept here. And so in looking at the chart, we have personal space for social interactions. And so there we are standing up. And so people who are close to us, like family, really personal friends that are really close to us, our best friends, things like that, they can then be more of an intimate space with us. They can be where they can actually touch our arm, give us a hug, sit right next to us. They can be right there closer to us in that hot pink space, which is, really close, within 1 to 1.5 feet of our personal body. But then if we know you casually and we're friends with you at school, we like you, like even here in the shelter, we like them, they like us, but they still are not really close to us. They might even move up to a casual closeness to us, which is within 4 feet of us. Sometimes 1.5 feet to 4 feet really is interacting with close friends or closer people. As the children develop a relationship with us, they may go from this green public line to the yellow social line to the kind of pink or salmon colored casual line. We seldom will get into that intimate space with them unless they are just really connected to us and they feel really close, and it may be a situation when they want more hugs and things like that. That's when you know you've made a closer connection to a child, because they want that from you. Social space is interacting between acquaintances, so like kids in class that you're friends with but you're not really close to, that you're kind with and they're kind to you, or people that you see in a work setting, just like coworkers. Some coworkers may be so close that they'll hug another coworker, but some coworkers don't, and they want that distance. So that's 4 to 12 feet distance. And then of course public spaces, people that you don't know, people out in the world that you see in stores or in the mall, or interacting with wherever you go in public. They should be anywhere from 12 feet or greater from you. You may walk past people in a grocery store pushing a grocery cart, but you wouldn't choose to stand really close to them because you don't know them. And so that's something that's important for us to teach kiddos, is what does that space look like, and how to make sure that they understand that they're allowed to have that personal space from others. Don't fence me in. Violence-prone individuals perceive the need for a wider territorial space in order to feel comfortable, almost 5 times the normal physical space. So if we think in terms of that chart that we just saw earlier with the green, the yellow, the salmon color, and the pink color chart on Standing By Me, when kiddos experience anger, sometimes they feel like they might need more space so they don't have the urge to reach out and hit you or to defend themselves. So in terms of thinking of that lady behind the fence, she's like, look, I feel trapped, back away from me because I feel trapped. In the graph where you see the little steps, those tiny little feet, see how they feel trapped by the other people around them. They need more breathing room. So when kids are asking for personal space, we can give that to them. We don't want to send them to their room as a punishment ever, because that's not allowed. But if a youth says, hey, I need to go to my room to get some breathing room and get some space, that's fine. We still have to monitor them. So you can still be there in the hallway. So you've got that 4 feet boundary from them in that hallway, so you can still monitor them and keep a safe eye on them, but allow them that time for quiet reflection. Don't ask them constant questions. Just let them know that, hey, I'm going to be out in the hallway for you if you need to talk. When you're ready to talk and you're calm and you feel like you're ready to talk, I'm here for you, but I'm just going to sit here quietly and do paperwork or whatever you're doing. But that way you're not making them feel threatened or backed into a corner. Let's reflect on this question here. How might you feel when another person, a youth, a family member, etc., has a different spatial boundary than you do? Can you think about that and kind of, reflect on that and how it made you feel? How will you be able to address your own spatial boundaries? Have you ever had somebody who's a close talker and wants to hold on to you while talking, or somebody who you may be a close talker and they walk away from you a lot. If they're walking away from you a lot, it's because you're invading their space. So they have to walk away from you because you're staying too close to them or you're getting too close to them. And also in terms of just thinking, about people who have way too much uncomfortable eye contact. Some people don't like that staring you down conversations to where you're just, staring somebody down. Make sure your eye contact is not invasive and bothering to someone as well. In this activity, I want you to kind of reflect back to some of our kiddos and think to yourself just a note of how the kiddos responded to personal space, whether they were kind of like, I like to call them space invaders, where they're close talkers and like to hang on to you and cling to you and climb on you and that kind of thing, space invaders, versus somebody who wants that, don't tread on me, get back kind of social distance, where they're going to draw a boundary and you can't cross that line. So reflect on that and think about how your own spatial boundaries impacted those young people. Now, let's reflect what other aspects involve tone. So it's not just what you say, but how you say it. We've said that before. So with tone, we're dealing with, does it sound stern? Is it confidence? Is it possibly aggression? Confidence and aggression can sound very similar. Timid or wavering. It's either a fear or a lack of self-assurance. If they kind of have a tremor to their voice, or they're talking and looking down and their voice goes to a low, almost a whisper. That's what timid and wavering sounds like. Lowered, uncertainty. So they talk and they get quieter, uncertainty. Or a raised voice, which is anger or agitation. And also a raised voice could be excitement. It could be a positive thing and not just a negative thing. So it could be excitement and joy, because I know sometimes little girls get loud and giggly and overpowering it, but their voices are raised because they're excited. Volume. Loud, overpowering, authority and willingness to hear others, so you're shouting. Or soft and unassuming, docile and possible fear. And so that real, remember that turtle confrontation style, they're going to get weak and quiet and kind of pull away. And so their voices almost disappear. Rate of speech is slow, but rhythmic rate is soothing. But a controlled, both calm and firm, promote confidence. So that's why we say when you're in playful engagement, you have that slow but rhythmic, playful, sweet speech. And then when you need to do structured engagement and you need to redirect them, you have that more controlled, firm, smaller words, brief sentences, and you have a confidence to your voice, that assertiveness to your voice, but not domineeringness to your voice. But always being polite, being respectful, no name calling. Remember, don't say things like, oh my gosh, who's stinky? Oh my gosh, who's this, that, and the other. Don't use things like that, because it's very harmful, hurtful, and it's embarrassing, and it's harassing kids. And try to be polite, using like please and thank you. And to your own fellow coworkers, practicing that in front of the kiddos, using Mr. or Miss, so they understand that we're adults. Now it's time to proceed with caution. Handle them carefully, for words have more power than atom bombs. That's a really good quote, especially in our environment. Do not get loud or yell over a screaming person. That'll only make them angrier. Wait until he or she takes a breath, speaking calmly at a normal volume. Respond simply. Repeat if necessary. Answer informational questions, no matter how rudely they ask. Why do I have to blankety blank play that game? This is a real information-seeking question. It just had a cuss word in the middle, and it was said kind of with sarcasm. Do not answer abusive questions. And so, why are all staff such blankety blank? You don't have to answer that question. That's just kind of to get a reaction out of you. Help the youth talk out angry feelings rather than acting on them. For instance, when we have the sentence with, why do I have to blankety blank play that game? We could ask them to restate that without using the expletive, but being calm and using a peaceful voice, kind of with our redos, and asking them what other games would they suggest. Making it more of an open-ended question rather than listing a bunch of things on or lecturing them about using profanity. It's better at that point to just ask them for more information. And then when they complain about staff, well, all the staffs are blankety blanks, or all the staffs are this, that, and the other. If it's a comment just to get a rise out of you and you get all uptight and frustrated and angry, that was their goal. So it's better to disengage from that and do not answer the abusive question. Kind of disregard that one. And then ask the young person, hey, tell me more about how you're feeling. Just try to redirect that question to a healthier, more open-ended question rather than just letting them make mean statements. Here's some key verbal de-escalation tips. The big one is don't be defensive. Do not be defensive. When we get defensive about whatever they're saying, we actually have immediately lost the game. It's pointless to even try because the kid knows we're frustrated. The adult or whoever we're dealing with knows we're frustrated. And so then it just becomes an argumentative conversation because we're defensive and then they're going to keep being offensive, and it's a lose-lose conversation. A big thing is to be honest. Be honest with them. Don't lie. Don't promise things you can't deliver. Explain our limits, rules, and safety concerns. And so if you're telling them no for a reason that is a violation of our rules or violation of time for right now, or it's not just available at this time, or if it's a safety concern, be honest with them and tell them why you've had to say no. Most of all, be respectful. If we're calm and kind and respectful, they will be calm, kind, and respectful. We don't have to feed into anything. It's kind of not like a this for that kind of situation to where you're mean to me, I'll be mean to you, or you're smart alecky to me, I'll be smart alecky to you. That's not what this is about. It's about being calm and being respectful. Empathize with their feelings, not just their behaviors. And so remember, all behaviors have a meaning and there's a reason behind the behavior. So we need to empathize with the feeling behind that behavior. Are they hurt? Are they sad? Are they afraid? Are they lonely? Are they frustrated about something? So we have to get to the bottom of what they're feeling. And then, as always suggest alternatives. Not a whole bunch of alternatives. Try to keep our choices down to 2 if we can, but try to suggest alternative words, alternative behaviors, encouraging them to use positive words that were respectful and kind, or gentle and kind words, that kind of thing like that with our TBRI. The first and only de-escalation objective really is to reduce the level of anxiety. So it encourages the possibility for healthy communication. Reasoning with an enraged person, a person who has got full-blown symptoms of anger, screaming, yelling, throwing, kicking, that kind of thing. Reasoning with an enraged person is just not possible. So you need to wait for them to calm down. You need to be quiet. You need to let them go to the calming center. You need to work with them on maybe some self-regulation techniques. Maybe you need to give them some space where you can still see them. And allow them time to sit quietly in their own thoughts before you have a conversation with them. But let them know that as soon as they're ready to speak in an inside voice, and we're going to talk in an inside voice that's calm, as soon as we can get ourselves regulated and calm, and that's I like the words that we use, regulated and calm. As soon as we can get regulated and calm, we can talk this through and work it out, because your goal is to help them meet their underlying need. When a person is angry, use minimal disruptors. What do I mean by that? You need to be able to do some nonverbal kind of body language, like head nodding, like an agreement. Eye contact is always good. Not staring them down, but eye contact and kind of moving your head like they know you're listening to them. You can also do some simple, small verbal responses like, okay, I see, I'm listening. Just so they know that you're there. They don't need you to completely give them rephrased statements of what they've said back to them like you do in active listening. They don't need that when they're in a full rage. They're not willing to have you do that. That'd make them agitated. So you want to use minimal encouragers, which are like those words, okay, I see, I'm listening, to demonstrate to the person that you're listening to them and paying attention without stalling the dialogue or creating an undue interruption, because then they feel that you're over talking them, and that oftentimes makes them feel as they can't be heard, so it makes them even madder. So you want to make sure that you are limited with that. You allow them that time to be heard without unnecessary interruptions. Once they are calmed down, then we get into reflective listening. And so that's how do we demonstrate reflective listening? How to master reflective listening? Well, number one, we do active listening. We pay full attention without any interruptions. I mean, you can do that head nod thing, okay, but you don't want to constantly say, okay, because then they feel as though you're just kind of trying to make them hush or hurry up. Notice their nonverbal cues. See if your nonverbal cues are coinciding with theirs, and that seems to be working out well, and they feel like they're being heard. Again, nod to show you're engaged. Number two, show empathy. Pay full attention, no interruptions. Notice their nonverbal cues. Nod and show that you're engaged with them. Smile, if need be. Show some kind of, positive facial feedback without words, just so they're having their ability to get their full message across. Then you can actually summarize and clarify. Now, again, remember, this is with people who are not fully enraged, people who are calm, but they're wanting to get their point across, so they can be a little bit passionate about getting their point across, but they are calm at the moment. And so you can summarize and clarify by paraphrasing their key points. You can ask questions to clarify, and you can confirm understanding before proceeding. So, like if a child was mad because they feel like they never get to go into the dining room first to get their plate first. And so, unfortunately, we have toddlers in the house. And so sometimes we might be able to say, I realize from what you're telling me here that you would like to be able to get your plate first. However, the toddlers have to get sat first because they're littler and they leave earlier from that dining room than we do, and they have more of a difficulty of processing information. So how about we look at you going first after the toddlers? That would be a good way to acknowledge that that person has this goal, but there is a conflict in the goal, but then we've figured out a solution that might work as a result of having this discussion with one another, and make sure they're in agreement to it, and let them provide feedback if they agree or disagree with the thoughts. It doesn't mean that the answer always has to be yes. Sometimes it is a no, but here's the reason why the no exists. So that's very important, is that when we do reflective listening and we provide feedback, we want to make sure that we're respectful, but we also want to make sure that if we have to give back feedback that they're not willing or not accepting, which is the answer no usually, or not right now, we have to give the reasoning behind that. And then finally, respond mindfully by being respectful with your feedback, keeping personal judgment aside. Don't, make comments or labels about anybody in some form of a judgmental way, and offer insights or advice when asked. So if they ask you for insight or advice, then offer a reply back. Always making sure that you reflect back to make sure that they understood what you said and that their message came across to you. Like, what I'm hearing you say is blah. Is that correct? That kind of message. Here are some more open-ended questions to use when you're doing reflective listening. Use phrases like, tell me more about that, or what do you think? Allow you to get more, these questions allow you to get more information. It allows you to assess whether the situation is potentially dangerous to you or not, and it allows you to assess whether the person is rational. Other open-ended questions like, what else would you like to play? What else would you like to do? What else could we eat? What could be another alternative healthy snack? You've got to make sure that we use good words, because they could easily say, well, I want candy for snack. Well, candy's not an option because that's not a healthy snack. And so, tailoring your words to meeting the goal that we have. Because a lot of times kids are wanting to discussed time frames within the schedule or what we're doing, and there's conflict within the schedule or what we're doing. If they're asking you a question that they're frustrated with, it's about their case that you really don't have the answer to, then you're going to have to defer to case management or to administration, who might have those answers, because it could be a situation of, when am I going to go home? You don't know that answer, and you can't answer that question honestly, nor could I. That's really not at our decision. And so we would have to defer that back to the original placement person and get more details. And sometimes those questions are better worked on in even the counseling session. For our reflective question, can you think of a time when someone supported you by asking these open open-ended questions. Kind of make a list of questions that you might ask a child that you're having troubles with, or questions that have helped you in the past yourself. It's always good to kind of make yourself kind of a running list or a tabulation of things that you might want to ask somebody when they're frustrated. Because it's harder to think of those things in the moment. So if we think of them ahead of time and reflect back on them, then it's more useful. Now we're at the end of this training. You can add conflict communication styles and verbal de-escalation to your EBI or Emergency Behavior Intervention Toolbox. Remember, if you need help practicing some of these techniques, to get with an administrator and they can work with you on more of a one-to-one level to help you process this training. Thank you.